Hi. Hello. There you are. You can't speak. You can't move. But this opens you up to the influence. And it breaks down your defenses. Trust me. All right? You're gonna love it.
In a world in which general audiences have been conditioned to watch horror movies a certain way, that is, establish an evil antagonist early on, explicitly show a family typically in the midst of a poorly fleshed out crisis, engage with this antagonist in a way that can create tension, eventually reveal this antagonist fully for the audience in a poorly written, lazy, and obvious dump of expository dialogue, and fill the runtime with myriad jump scares, real and fake, in such a way that the audience can anticipate them, effectively swapping out genuine horror for a startling thrill ride that ends with either the entire story wrapped up in a neat little bow, a ridiculous unearned twist, or the type of lazy ambiguity you'd expect to see in the worst script imaginable. How exactly can modern horror movies interrogate and explore the human condition in real ways without leaning too heavily on the well-worn conventions of the genre that have grown into a sort of corporate pop aesthetic that has the potential to generate large sums of money with every new release? Enter Ari Aster, the young writer-director whose feature debut, 2018's Hereditary, was one of the best films of that year, as well as one of the best horror films of the decade. Now enter Midsommar, Aster's sophomore effort, a film that bore the burden of the almost impossibly heavy and admittedly unfair responsibility of following up Hereditary with something equally as inventive, shocking, relevant, and provocative. And well, Midsommar did just that and maybe more. This film lays its cards on the table right away, and I mean right away, in the very first shot, immediately calling attention to not only what you see in front of you in that moment, but to the significance of symbolism to the story in general, forcing you to pay close attention to every subsequent frame and discover aspects of the story that simply will not be explored the easy way through expository dialogue. The images scattered throughout the film foreshadow literal events in the story, but they do even more thematically, especially if you know what to look for. So to say that this film lends itself well to multiple viewings is an understatement. Now, in a sense, the idea of a film telling you exactly what it is right away seems antithetical to the idea that that very same film is begging to be seen multiple times, but therein lies the brilliance of what Aster has done. On the surface, it's very clear what's being set up, and if you have even an a priori knowledge of the pillar standing in the folk horror genre, most recognizably The Wicker Man, you know what this is all leading to, but this is really just the framework for what Aster is really getting at, as evidenced by the language of the film. The various pieces of art scattered throughout most of the frames, the motivated camera movements, the colors, the editing techniques, and many, many more aspects of this all point toward what is at the heart of Midsommar, and that is the decomposition of a relationship that died for at least one of the characters long, long before we met them. I want to stay away from spoilers in this analysis, so I'll avoid the specifics for now, but I will say that the corpse of the relationship at the core of Midsommar is absolutely brutal to watch, because Aster has taken the approach of Bergman's brilliant Scenes from a Marriage with the script and Tarkovsky's The Sacrifice directorially, which, oddly enough, is a direct homage to Ingmar Bergman shot in Sweden, but this combination of influences created a smartly written and patiently directed observation of emotional passivity created by intense grief and anxiety being met by passive aggression, indifference, and indecisiveness, which paradoxically facilitated a strange sort of codependency that is headed nowhere. So with that painfully depressing core, how is Midsommar watchable and entertaining? Well, let's start with the visuals. Most of this film takes place in direct sunlight, which is something that most filmmakers avoid because it makes continuity a nightmare. But it was pulled off so well here, creating a dreamlike, otherworldly visual aesthetic that juxtaposes the aforementioned dark interiority of the central characters. The cinematography is masterful, from the framing to the inspired camera movements Aster uses in scenes that could have easily been shot in a straightforward way. For example, there's a car ride filmed upside down, disorienting the audience and creating a sense of unease and tension for what's about to happen, which is usually done exclusively by music in these scenes. There are also dialogue scenes that play out in one interesting shot instead of the standard shot-reverse shot technique we've all become accustomed to seeing, effectively slowing down the conversations and forcing the audience to watch actively. The VFX go hand in hand with the cinematography, especially in scenes following our characters as they trip on shrooms. We see the trees breathe, the flowers pulsate, and faces distort in such a subtle way that it can be startling to notice because it really doesn't call that much attention to itself, especially in the wider shots.
Can you feel that? The energy coming up from the earth?
A big challenge that we took on in this film was putting the spectator into the experience of somebody going through a mushroom trip. This is the first scene that kind of introduces psychedelic elements in the film that will be more prevalent later on.
Look, the trees too, they're breathing.
There's a lot of sound design work here that's also helping bring us into her subjectivity. When she looks up at the tree, we notice that the tree now seems to be bending and warping, that the texture seems to be moving. As I was working with the visual effects artists on these shots, we managed to experiment a lot and find what was too much and what was not enough.
The sound design is also amazing and it complements these scenes in a real way. Speaking of the sound, the score is fantastic. Composed by Bobby Krilik, the music is full of hard-hitting strings, creating a deep ambiance that hits at all the right times, only adding to the film's disorienting aesthetic. The editing is also flawless, and bonus points are given for completing the nightmarish task of getting the continuity right in direct sunlight. The performances are all great, but Florence Pugh was a revelation here. From subtle epiphanic moments to all-out panic attacks and hysterical breakdowns, her ability to inhabit the character and make the audience feel is absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to see what she does next. Overall, Midsommar is an achievement in filmmaking that gets better every time I see it. I've already been to see it 3 times, and I'm ready to see it again. This is an amazing film that deserves to be seen on the biggest screen you can catch it on. This is my first time giving out this rating this year, but this is a 10 out of 10. Don't miss this one.
What am I going through?
We just need to acclimate.
I don't want to acclimate, I want to go.
Absolutely not.
What's happening?